I call Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, thank you very much for that. It's a bit disappointing in some ways because Jackie Dean was such a contributor in the Government Administration Committee to this bill, and I say that in all sincerity, that she certainly made a contribution around starting to ask some of the questions about whether we were... Well, no, we didn't hear from the member in the Select Committee apart from an interjection here and there and interjection in the speech. She appears to want to call back, Mr Speaker, that she gave up so quickly just before. Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to rise in the third reading of this bill. The Christ College Canterbury Amendment Bill came before the House because the governors of Christ College had a problem. They had an issue around trusts and as they say, property vested in the college where the purposes for which it was vested was either redundant, they were uncertain as to how to apply it, it was impractical from their point of view to implement it, or the property was generating income that was either inadequate or in excess of the amount necessary for those purposes. And we took that request from Christ College at face value when they came to the committee and they wrote a reasonable letter and we began our deliberations. But it was in beginning our deliberations that we began to wonder that we thought we were giving quite a sweeping powers to the board, the Christ College board, because really what they were doing, as my colleague Ruth Dyson mentioned in the committee stages, was giving them carte blanche to take what someone had given for a very specific purpose and then do something quite different with it. And I think, as anyone knows who's been part of gifting money to institutions, that it is extremely meaningful. In my own case, in my old high school, my family is given a leadership prize, and my father, who was the chair of the Board of Governors of that school, was the person who said, I think we should do this. And he's now passed away. And it would be for me if my old school were to suddenly say, well, actually, we don't think we really need to give that prize anymore. We've got lots of other ways of recognising leadership. I would find that difficult. And I think, Mr Speaker, in all seriousness here, we do have to recognise that the families who have given this money have given it for a particular purpose. Now, in many cases, it was not possible for Christ College to actually contact the benefactor or the settlor, or as they call it in legal terms, to be able to say whether or not they were comfortable with this. So I respect the fact that they weren't going out of their way in any way whatsoever to cause discomfort to those who had given the money, but it is a factor that we should bear in mind when people do give the money. So the committee began its work, Mr Chair, Mr Speaker, to find its way through how we could create an environment in which we were able to allow Christ College to sensibly use and appropriately use the money that was given to them, but equally also retain the integrity of the original settlers. And so that was what led us to amend the bill, and basically what we did was amend the bill to ensure that it was consistent with the Charitable Trusts Act. So we took the wording directly from the Charitable Trusts Act and placed it within what was clause 4 that we were debating in the committee stages, and that really was about making sure that they had to fulfil certain criteria about the fact that things were redundant, that was inappropriate, and I think that was a useful addition by the committee. The committee then obviously also recommended inserting the new subsection that allowed the governing body to use for another purpose excess income from trusts that generate more than for their donated purpose. Now, again, that's useful and important because a number of the trusts that have been mentioned today already generate excess funds, but we also wanted there to be a new requirement for the purpose of the trust to be as close as reasonably possible to the purpose for which it was given. And I'll just give one example, Mr Speaker, which I think is interesting, and my colleague Mr Parker referenced this particular gift in one of his interventions earlier. This was the Barker Memorial gift, which was for a scholarship for a boy resident of Gisborne or any of the counties of Cook, Waikohu, Uawa, Waiapu or Matakoa. Those, and is of a New Zealand Maori ethnic origin. And the trustees, the board of Christ College came to us and said that the last act of the trustees in setting this up was to prescribe very narrow residency requirements, and as a result the trust had more income than was required to satisfy the narrow purpose. Now when they say more income, they mean it, Mr Speaker, because it's $245,000 that currently sits unspent there. And as my colleague Mr Parker said, members of the committee really did feel that it would be possible to meet, as they're written there, the requirements of the trust to find someone in the Gisborne or East Coast area who fulfilled this. Now, it may be that what we've got here is some form of shorthand, and in fact it's extremely specific around the regional arrangements. But I hope now that the committee has made the changes that we have, that it will be possible for the college to apply this scholarship to someone perhaps from the North Island, or just simply to apply it for Māori students, because that was the original purpose. If it's not possible to use the funding for exactly that purpose anymore, then we now have a requirement that we have placed in through the select committee process for a new purpose for a trust to be as close as reasonably possible to the purpose for which the property was given. And we've had in this House the National Party making a new policy to provide for more places in private schools for people on scholarship, and there is mixed views, I'd have to say, on this side of the House about whether that's a priority use of money. But here's an example where we have a college that has a gift that is specifically for, or certainly can be applied for, people who are from this Gisborne area, who are of Māori origin. It may well now be possible, with the change we've made, to slightly expand that and still keep to the purpose of that particular trust. So, Mr. Speaker, that was what the committee regarded as being some of the most significant things that we did, because we wanted the college to be able to continue to apply the trusts and the gifts that it had got for sensible purposes, for appropriate purposes, but not for any purpose. And I think, as I've said earlier in earlier interventions, the governors of Christ College were very amenable to this. They weren't setting out in any way to use the money inappropriately, but they did want to make sure that they could have some more flexibility in the use of this. Mr. Speaker, in some of the time remaining to me, I do just want to reflect on the broader matter, and I'll seek your indulgence of this, of private bills coming to this House. 2 points about that. One is the fact that this private bill is in the name of Nicky Wagner, and Nicky Wagner is obviously an MP resident in the Christchurch area. It is convention, as I understand it, that the electorate MP for an area is the person in whose name bills like this come up. And I think that my colleague Brendan Burns has supported this bill, and I think that's good. But it is interesting to note at this time that this is how this has happened, and obviously as time wears on we'll watch out for that. The second thing I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, around private bills is the question of how we treat them when they come into the House. And I do think that from time to time when they come in, we think, well, this is just a bill from an organisation, and why do we need to put it under the kind of scrutiny that we would do with perhaps a government bill or some of the other bills that are coming up later on this order paper that are in the name of private members. What this bill indicates to us is that we must be vigilant. We must make sure that we must make sure that we look at each bill on its own merits and suggest and make the appropriate changes, regardless of whether this is for a private entity or part of a government bill. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have been part of this process, glad that the college will now be able to use these gifts for appropriate purposes with some flexibility while still retaining the integrity of the gifts.